Good afternoon. I am Gigi Davis with Piedmont, Virginia Community Service, Community College. I was like, I can talk really. Yeah, you can't do too many things at the same time. I'm Gigi Davis, the Job and Internship Coordinator with PVCC's Career Services Office, and I want to say thank you so much to Zack and Jeremy from Journey Group to join us today for our Employer Spotlight, where we're going to talk about they're with Journey Group, and we're going to talk about their career journey and a little bit about how hiring happens in this industry, because I have had parents in particular tell our students, don't pursue graphic design. There are no jobs. What are you thinking? And I actually constantly have to push back going, there are jobs. It's not like nursing, especially during COVID, but there are jobs. So anyway, so let's get started. Oh, I actually might have to take a little tiny bit of break to look at anybody asking questions, just so to give the viewers if I'm looking distracted, that's what I'm doing, is looking for questions. And so, Jeremy, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little about your journey?
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate using Journey too. That's very on brand for us. I'm Jeremy Cherry. I'm the Senior Digital Designer at Journey Group, and I work with my colleague Zack here with us, who's our Studio Creative Director, our Studio Director. We create basically most things for screens. When you think about websites, when you think about applications, even some digital experiences, even as that pertains to brands and motion work, which I know is also, motion graphics is something that is a program here at PVCC. So that is something we also do in our studio. But I'll keep it brief as far as a history goes. I'm old, but I'm not that old, so hopefully it'll be short. I graduated from James Madison in 2011, and then I moved down briefly to Nashville, Tennessee, and worked for about 5 years. So I started out working in a really tiny nonprofit in Nashville, and then between doing that job for about a year or two, I did a little bit of freelance for a short term, and then kind of fully transitioned into the agency world. So I worked at a agency that was formerly called Paramore Digital down there for, I think, about 4 or 5 years. And then I am originally from Virginia, so I was really eager to get back to Virginia. I enjoyed Nashville, but I was eager to get back home. And so I started working at Journey Group almost 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years in May. So for all that time, just for context, I've always been within graphic design discipline, broadly speaking, but mostly digital design has been my concentration for my career.
Cool. Thank you. Zack, how about you?
Sure. I'm older than Jeremy, so this is going to take a while. I'm going to grab a snack. I'm Zack Bryant. I'm a principal and studio director at Journey Group, and grew up in Richmond, and always was into drawing and art. That was just always my thing from the time I can remember. But when it came time to finish up high school, I was going to enter the service. That was my plan. But kind of at the last minute, changed my mind and went to JMU, same school as Jeremy, to study Go Dukes, to do their pre-law. I thought I wanted to become an attorney, a trial lawyer. I'd read To Kill a Mockingbird too many times. Is there such a thing as too many times? But that only really lasted the first year I was there. And I had taken some fine art electives and really just felt the draw to be more creative. I basically took all the courses I could take around pre-law with the professor I liked, and kind of had to make a decision. And so I switched and declared as an art student, and then concentrated on graphic design. So one funny thing about James Madison is there's a few different ways you can end up with a design degree. And I went through the sort of fine art track. And then interned at an agency called the Martin Agency in Richmond.
Big agency.
Yeah, yep, they do some really neat work. And so sort of thought that advertising would be the natural thing to do. Richmond's by no means a hub of advertising, but there's some there. And so I thought that's what I would get into. With VCU right there, there's a constant sort of pool of creative talent and media production. And so I did some of that, worked with different creative directors and art directors in the area, freelanced, got really interested in branding startups, creating logos and systems for visual identity. kinds of work. And so partnered with a guy who was based in Los Angeles and started a little brand company, just doing that sort of work for a couple of years, all the while doing a lot of freelance advertising. And then got my first kind of full-time advertising gig doing all work for the healthcare industry. So we were doing a lot of recruitment. That, as you mentioned, Gigi, that's a vertical that has been growing and continues to grow.
Yeah.
And so there was plenty of work to do there, and I got to do all kinds of stuff. I mean, I don't know that I would necessarily celebrate I wouldn't put the work in the portfolio, but I got to do a ton of different things. Out of home billboards, I got to direct photo shoots. I got to collaborate with lots of different kinds of copywriters, do a lot of really interesting interactive work at that point. We were figuring out how to put little applets on people's computers, little flash apps, so we could post RSS feeds of job availability and things like that. So I just got really dunked into lots of different kinds of things, and did that for a handful of years, and then joined Journey Group as a production designer back in 2008. So 12 and some change. And ironically, I came because I was really interested in the fine craft of printing. Doing advertising, I was getting to do a lot of sort of marketing materials that were, effective and did their job. But that's always kind of you're doing economical printing. You're trying to get as many pieces in as many hands as possible. So you're using cheap paper and cheap inks and cheap printers. That's the whole idea.
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested in printmaking and the sort of art of printing. And so Journey Group, to me, being in Richmond, was the pinnacle of really high production value for printed things. And that continues to be part of our what we're known for. And so I came as the bottom guy on the totem pole. I was the production designer, just prepping files that other people had designed for the printer and getting to interact a lot with pressmen and people who that was their whole life was putting ink onto paper. And so learned a ton about that. And then over the years, I've just bounced around and done different roles. But yep, now I'm not doing much at all with print and working a lot with guys like Jeremy on websites and applications and things for screens.
Well, that's what it kind of leads to, actually, because, I love to hear about it was great to hear about your internship with the Martin Group. And actually, it's amazing that a JMU student was able to beat out a VCU student, having VCU in their backyard and having a lot of fine arts programs there. So you must have done something really special to get that internship.
That would be a nice way of putting it. I think to their credit, I think Martin is careful to not just have people from VCU. I mean, there are people from out of state, but you're right to say that there's plenty of competition for any seats available.
Right. Well, and it also sounds like the level of skill that you guys both have developed. I mean, between the fine arts and print and then now digital. So do you mind talking about like how you've developed that skill? Was it all developed in your college program, or you're just really great about learning it on the fly? Or do you guys have great professional development that you do as part of your job?
I would say D, all of the above. At least I can only speak for myself, and I'm sure it's very similar for Zack. Being familiar. Zack brought up JMU is really interesting with the design programs. I also studied design, but went through the communication school. It's kind of a bizarre, almost fragmented way of kind of pathing design degrees. But so I was kind of immersed in college with digital design, but it was more of they tried to have a pretty wide spectrum of design discipline, even things that would be more media specific and less, completely tied to graphic design. We had to learn writing, we had to learn videography, a lot of just kind of general media communication skills. So I did learn a fair bit in college, and it's funny now, even a decade later, going back and finding how I'm using some of the things I thought I would never use in new ways.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, we were of the generation, and Zack will smile when I say this, where everyone used Flash on the internet. That was a big thing. And I never thought I would use any of the skills I learned on Flash. But now, learning motion graphics, I've been able to use a lot of that same rationale in that realm, which is really cool. So I would say from a digital perspective, I can't necessarily speak as much to the print side. I have done some print design in the past, but have primarily been digital. It's been kind of a grab bag for me. I learned a lot of schools, or a lot from school rather, but often what I tell students is that I think the best thing I learned from the School of Media Arts and Design at JMU is just how to learn. And I know that sounds silly and can sound really simple, but I think it taught me how to just be a self-starter, that if there was something that I wanted to learn from a skill set standpoint, that there were resources out there, that there were faculty eager to help me to find those resources, even if they didn't necessarily specialize or, weren't experts in that area. So I think that kind of helped me, especially in the job field of being able to learn quickly. That was one of the skills that I was really grateful for, especially diving into the real world. It was overwhelming at first as a young designer to try to figure out, how do I learn new processes? How do I learn working with a team? How do I learn all of these things? And I think that kind of general education, spark helped me moving into that role. So a lot of it, of course, has been picked up in, just, being thrown in the deep end, for lack of a better term, and figuring it out as I go.
Yeah, and it's that Zach being from the more art side, because that's where I have some students that are in our graphic design. They're just in our program. They're like, I really want to focus on logos. And I'm like, nah, you really need to learn the web side. You need to learn. And like, I'm starting to see job descriptions. I know Willow Tree is about this UX, UI design, and, that's coding. And so talk about, Zach, your side, because you started it with the art side.
Yeah, that's true. I've come a long way since figure drawing class, or not, depending on how you feel about drawing naked people. But yeah, you're completely right. The industry, I think two things are true. The opportunities for design professionals have exploded.
Mm-hmm.
And we are part of an industry that loves to just rename things, but it's basically the same thing. Both of which can sort of contribute to a fatigue, I think. I mentioned that I started out at Journey Group really, and somewhat ironically now, to specialize in one very specific thing. And it's ironic only because I think I've actually become much more of a generalist in design, taking things that I learned studying architecture and fine art, and trying to sort of apply them to a design practice. And I think, Jeremy, I think you'd agree, a lot of what I do probably falls under the category of UX at a place like Willow Tree. I tend to think of it more as service design, but again, I think that's just semantics. So UX is user experience, UI you mentioned is user interface, how a person will use it and what it will be doing, and then kind of what it looks like and how they'll actually interact with it and get it to do what they want. And so I think for a graphic designer, a lot of that sort of fork in the road just comes down to, I think, what you want to build your chops in. Mm-hmm. Interface, which Jeremy is far more the expert in and could speak to, is much more akin to graphic design. It has a lot more to do with sort of visual design principles, how to move someone's eye around, how to make something make sense, how to group information into hierarchical sort of layouts where, okay, that seems really important, this seems less important, that's the thing I'm supposed to do. Whereas I've shifted more and more into service design, which really leans on journalism and demography, that kind of thing. So I'm really interested in team design, and I'm really interested in why we would do something, why we would spend this much money building a website or building an application or publishing a magazine. And so that leads me into all kinds of conversations and sort of what I think is often called design thinking more and more. Which, I think is a kind of design, but is quite different from sitting at a drafting desk, drawing. I still love drawing, but I think I would just encourage students to think well about, as they start out and set off down this path, do they really want to build these kinds of skills that are much more, they take a different kind of energy, I think, to get people, would you agree, Jeremy, get people in a room, get them to agree on a design decision, how to make a choice together for someone else, versus really much more execution oriented. And so for the kids that are more visual and want to draw logos, I actually think that they have maybe a similar fork in the road. And I would just say Jeremy models, I think, really well what someone who has a tremendous amount of talent for visual design can do by just orienting that for service for other brands and for other companies. So he's able to flex and create graphic systems and visuals that work for very different kinds of users and very different kinds of publishers and brands, organizations. Whereas I think there's another school of thought within design where you really build your own reputation, your own sort of look. You see that within like illustration would be maybe the most obvious example, but I think even within graphic design, There are designers who say, actually, I'm going to make the Zack Bryant style, and then other brands can kind of seek me out. And I think one of the big reasons to think well about that would be, if you're doing the latter, I think freelancing is probably the better path, or starting your own small firm. But if you want to work for agencies, which clearly Jeremy and I like, you really want to get good at sort of not having that ego, not having that, well, this is how I do it. And instead really cultivating sort of a service mindset of, it doesn't matter if I don't like that typeface, that's your brand typeface. My job is to make it look and work as well as it can.
So so that for what you're just talking about, their portfolio really needs to show diversity, a lot of, and not just one style, not just one brand or look, right?
I think if you're looking to work for an agency, yes. And that's why I think that having that curation early on matters a lot. I see a lot of young designers that haven't quite decided that question yet. And I think maybe the worst thing you can do is neither or both. Do you know what I mean? I think you either want to say, I'm a service, I design as a service. I don't put myself in front of the brand. And so, yes, to your point, you want to show a maximum diversity or variety of work, to say, wow, that's good, and that's good, and that's good. But I would never have thought the same person did all three. Or you want to say, if you hire me, this is the look you're getting, this is the style. And most young creatives are pretty sure they have a style. I'm pretty sure it's awesome. 1 out of 100 of them are correct about that. And so I think there you just want to get a lot of outside input, people you trust to critique it and say, do you think I should try to hone my chops to be a designer that can serve a lot of people? Or do you think that I'm one of the unique ones who really ought to cultivate the Zack Bryant look?
Mm-hmm.
I think that speaks to really well to talking about user experience, which again, like Zack said, Zack's led us in our studio to think well about service design and user experience, not just as a thing that one person does, in a job description, but something our entire studio, really our entire company does. So, while you'll see, especially larger companies, where you may have a devoted position, that's kind of all they're doing in that kind of, strategic focus. It's really something that it kind of falls very flatly along all of our roles within our studio, whether you're a, programmer or developer, whether you're a content strategist or writer. We're all trying to think well about experience, which, to your point, Gigi, talking about portfolios, that's where context is super key, I think, now within digital portfolios. That, one of the things that I was surprised by, I was always intimidated by the visual side of design, only because I came through communications and not art. But what I found is that so many aesthetic things were easy to learn on my own. Not to say they were easy principles or didn't take a lot of work, more to say that I could emulate things, I could find things online that I liked, I could learn about certain aspects of typography, color, layout. I could do that on my own and practice on my own, but what I couldn't do was do real projects with real people on my own. That required a team, that required working with folks. So I was really grateful for being able to learn all of the things that Zack said. Like, that has, for me, been so much more valuable in a way than purely the aesthetic side of visual design, or even digital design specifically. It's just been learning, what is it like to hear from people? What is it like to, in a way, decode what they mean when they say this, or what they may come in thinking they need one thing, but after listening to them, you really realize that their organization may be better served by this other thing, for instance. So yeah, that's all to say that, like, portfolios are of course really important within our industry, but I would say the context that you can apply or even speak about your portfolio is of equal importance in our world.
So,
Jeremy, sorry,
go ahead, Zack.
I had a thought when you were talking that may or may not be useful. It's been so long since I was actively on the job hunt with a portfolio. Do you see any folks going in together on collaborative projects for the purposes of demonstrating skill? I'm just thinking, if I were starting out, or someone with my skill set, I could try to make a complete project by myself, but it only really serves to highlight the areas that I'm weak in. Whereas if I partnered with another person or two other people, a really strong front-end developer, for example, an animator, a motion graphics person, the three of us or the four of us or the two of us could make something very good. And then I could just articulate the part of that I was involved in. I think and this is getting ahead, I'm sure, Gigi, but thinking as someone who does hire people occasionally, I would be more impressed with that than, I put all the hats on and did my best at the 12 different things that go into making a great looking website. And I'm good at 2 of them, you know. I think that's a harder sell.
That's a great point, because that's actually when you were talking about, hey, getting started in this field. So obviously getting that experience, whether it's project based in the classroom versus an actual internship within an agency, probably, or within a design group, not, whether, because like here at PVCC, we have a marketing and media team. We hire a graphic artist and a photographer to, help represent ourselves so that, people come to PVCC. So it's sounding like it would be really good for students to be doing those group projects more so than independent projects, if I interpreted that correctly.
I think if you're going to, if you're trying to show off a completed website, for example, or application, for example, I think if you want to become a branding expert, you can create, brand systems probably by yourself. And just a quick note on that, I think at least there used to be a fair amount of scorn thrown at like speculative work, fake work, pretend work. That's never bothered me. I don't want to speak for you, Jeremy, but if somebody comes and says, I'm just looking for my first opportunity, I clearly haven't had the opportunity to work with Nike yet, but I went ahead and created a bunch of magazine spreads and this idea for a mobile campaign and a couple t-shirt graphics for Nike. I understand that wasn't really for Nike. You can still, that's still a great way to show off your talent and your ambition, I think. So I would encourage people to
agree. I think to me, it shows an energy around wanting to work, wanting to do, design work. I've had the exact same, kind of reaction to those kinds of projects, like you said, Zach, that can be it's kind of a silly critique within the industry of some of this kind of speculative work. But yeah, I'm the same way. To me, I get really excited when I see someone who's, working maybe even outside of coursework to decide. And that was another thing that you both brought up that I think is excellent. Working with other students from different backgrounds is so key. I think universities and colleges do such a great job a lot of times of pairing folks together. One point is I've worked with as many engineers now as I have designers. So it's been so excellent to hear and to learn from that way of thinking, that a lot of the same traits and a lot of the same, strategies, though we may call them something different, are really, one and the same, which has been a really cool thing. So I love when I see students pair together and it's a designer, like you said, or a motion designer and an engineer or a data scientist that are all saying, hey, why don't we come together and explore how to use our skills to do something really cool, or even to serve our community. That's the other thing. I'm most impressed when I see a tool that they created and said, we realized there was a need in our community. We decided to do something about it, and we created this application or this website. That's always been really impressive to me, to see people kind of bridge the gap between disciplines.
I've actually, when I work with our students, because they do a 1-credit internship for our graphic design program, and oftentimes I'll say, hey, what are you passionate about? Why don't you go to that nonprofit, who, really could use some logo or web or, a pamphlet or a flyer for a particular, and I was like, that will benefit them as well as you, and that it's a win-win. Because I do find, and it's, this kind of bridges into y'all's web development internship, because it is not easy to get paid internships in this industry, from what I see being the job and internship coordinator, and that they're pretty competitive, like the Martin group was for you, Zach. What kind of insights do you or suggestions or that do you guys have about getting those kinds of internships, or just general experiences to help them develop their portfolio?
I have an immediate thought, and Jeremy, you may have others or better ones. I think the mistake a lot of people make with internships and externships is thinking that the place that they get it is the most important part of that on the resume, and I totally disagree.
I agree.
If I see someone who's had an internship at a place I've never heard of before, but I get the sense that they learned a lot and were able to contribute a lot, and we're able to do what Jeremy was talking about, which is collaborate well, I don't care if that's, the tiniest little mom and pop print shop, or, a boutique web shop, or even just an in-house quote unquote, webmaster or site administrator for an e-commerce site or retail. I wouldn't become so focused on interning for the kind of company that I want to work for. I would become really focused on who would benefit from me being an intern. And maybe that's, the pet store down the road, who has a really lousy, online experience of buying dog food. If you can make that meaningfully better in 6 months or a year, whatever, that looks better on a resume than making coffee at the coolest shop in New York, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I can't speak as much to the hiring side of internships. I know Zach will have far more wisdom than me, but having worked alongside interns throughout my career, I've always really appreciated that kind of spirit, like Zach was saying, that folks that are willing, I know that Zach and I have even had the opportunity to sit with folks that may be just about to graduate college, or maybe have done an internship with Journey Group. And one of the things that I know that we've always collectively encouraged these folks is, take whatever job you can get. You don't have to wait for that dream job. That's something that you're going to be able to learn. You may even be able to practice things on the side as you're learning that, or bring some of those disciplines to bear in a way that you didn't even anticipate in a role that may not traditionally be what you're hoping for. But it seems that, these, at the risk of sounding cliche, with a lot of internships, you get what you put in. And
Yeah.
it seems to be the case. I'm with Zach. I haven't been in the job market in a while, but it seems to be that it can be easier to find opportunities when you're working and doing something, and kind of utilizing your skills, and not not getting rusty, I guess, with some of your design skills. Because that is one thing that I will say that I love, and it's a love-hate relationship with digital design, is that it's always changing so quickly that it's amazing how much it's changed even in the short time that I've been in the industry. So it's always great to be playing around and experimenting with things.
So it's more fun than exhausting?
I would say more fun. Yeah, I would say it's going more towards the love than the hate today. But yeah.
Gigi, I had one more thought. It's not exactly about internships, but maybe is relevant. I think even in the event that somebody can't find an internship, or can't kind of get that first toehold, I was just really shameless early on. I had two problems. I had a thin portfolio and I didn't have any money. And so I would barter a ton of design services. I didn't care. I would reach out to somebody on Craigslist and say, hey, I need that lawnmower. Can I design graphics for your pickup truck to trade? And I'm not saying the graphics were great, but the lawnmower didn't run great either. So the weirdest one ever was I just got married and my wife wanted canaries. She wanted canaries to sing. She's even more artsy than me. And I thought, how in the world, I can't afford canaries. But I found a guy in Virginia Beach that was a canary breeder, and he had rooms of canaries, beautiful birds singing beautifully, but his website was terrible. And so I just shot this guy an email through his canary website and said, if I design a website you like better than yours, will you trade me a breeding pair of canaries? Lo and behold, yes. He'd been wanting a better website. So just things like that. That's not a formal thing. I didn't put the canary breeder on my resume, I don't think. But it lets you build your chops. It lets you burn through some projects that are, you just have to learn by doing. And you might end up with a lawnmower that runs sometimes.
Well, and also that really brings into entrepreneurial skills as well as initiative. And that's where I'm constantly, trying to pull from students, like, hey, what have you done? And a lot of times they actually do what you say, Zach. They were like, oh, it was just that little canary thing. I was like, that's not just little. That's actually a lot of initiative and putting yourself out there. And, if it works, great. If it doesn't work, and that's where I do try to get students to realize failure is not always a bad thing. If something doesn't work out, you just try and try again. I think there's some little saying out there. So speaking about your web development internship, what are you guys looking for that?
For the one that's available now, yeah, we have very often internships available. Currently, our application practice that builds web applications basically software development, is looking for a junior software developer, web developer, to come in and learn a lot about the way we do those. The technology that's being used is usually called Jamstack. That's kind of the cool new way to think about it. But basically, somebody with a background in computer science or development or programming would be best suited for that. But the other thing to mention is, I can't think of a lot of times that we've turned down internships. We'll figure out a way to make it work, even in a less formal capacity. It's obviously a little bit weird right now with the Rona. But typically, we have people shadow us just for an afternoon. We have people come in and sit just in the mornings for a week or two. We've had people who are especially interested in the client-facing side of that, so they'll come and sort of sit in on meetings or presentations. So that's just to say, the current one is a pretty formal role that does need some engineering chops. But I would encourage anybody who's interested to reach out. We don't turn them down very often.
Well, yeah, that's what I try to tell students, saying, hey, you just never know if it's the timing, because, like I tell accounting students, don't think about hitting accountants up around tax time. They're a little busy trying to get taxes done. So that's the thing, is that somebody having initiative, having a good, put together a good creative resume, not just your standard resume. Is that what you guys look for? Because like if somebody sends you a standard resume, you're like, hey, you just lost your impressive moment.
It's never made sense to me why a designer would send, a Microsoft Word template resume. I just think, we can't read, so we're going to just look at what font you chose. So you might as well pick a good one.
But that's where I'll say, well, canva.com has some interesting creative resume ideas, but you don't use canva.com because you're trying to feature your skills. But if you're like, hey, I just want to get a sense, because there is also being, some people say, too creative on that resume. And talk about what's too creative.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. We tend to run more into the other problem, but
right.
I think the bigger problem we have, Gigi, is just basic follow-up. Answering the phone when it rings, getting back to emails quickly. I think if you that's probably the fastest, most surefire way to not get an opportunity, is to take 3 days to get back to a call or 3 days to get back to an email. Whatever your resume looks like.
That's right. Very good point. Or not to have your voicemail set up.
Full,
because that's where my son gets home and I clean out his voicemail.
You've got no excuse now. That's right.
Jeremy, can you think of an example of a resume that was too creative? That's a great question.
That is a great question. I'm with Zack that I think, unfortunately, I've probably seen the opposite. But I know that when I was coming through school, there was a big trend. I say trend, it may still be a thing. And it's very much to your point, talking about entrepreneurship and putting yourself out there, where designers got really creative about designing little kits that they may send to an employer that may or may not have an open job, which I've always been very shameless about how I've approached companies that may have listings or not. Journey Group was actually one of those.
We weren't hiring when we got your resume.
So I think that there's no shame in talking to someone or sending something through. I know that there was a photographer that came through our program before I did in college that had a really cool kit that he sent out to all kinds of clients, and he got everything from corporate editorial work from that to internships to opportunities with National Geographic. I mean, it was all from just that one gesture of him putting himself out there. So I've seen some really cool tactical ways of doing that. Really, the only things I can think of would be things that don't hint at your abilities or what you could offer. I think it's so important to have your personality, kind of stamped on something, whether it's just a written, resume or whether it's some sort of rich media like video or something like that. But I have not seen anything too avant-garde for our tastes yet.
So you mentioned that word. Oops, sorry, Zack.
Jeremy made me think of the one thing that we do see that I would encourage people not to do. I would discourage people from doing, which is I don't think being critical of the place that you want to work as a way in. We every now and then get one that's like, here's the 10 things that suck about your website, or here's the, the 3 things I would immediately fix about your logo. I get that seems cute, but I don't think that it works. I think coming in as affirming and excited, then you can get inside and begin to reform and make a place better. But don't start with that.
Yeah, that's a really great point. But you mentioned the word video, because I'm hearing more and more employers say they want that video representation. What does that mean to you all in this industry?
It's tricky. I have seen where there seems to be a trend in video interviews, and especially some of that's necessity with the pandemic, where maybe and I know that there's some interview apps where you have to answer questions via video responses and things like that. So I haven't necessarily been on the side of producing a feature film for your resume or something like that, but I'm all about this will be the web nerd in the room. I'm all about accessibility of information. So I think that if you wanted to do something creative, like create a video resume, being able to have the transcript of what you say, being able to link to resources in the description, just simple things that give people what they need. I'm probably like most humans where it can get really annoying to have to scrub back to the part that I want to rehear, whether that's audio or video. So things getting hidden or lost in translation, I would worry about a little bit. But yeah, I think it could be done well.
It's a little bit, before with websites, we were talking about how there's lots of different roles and it can be confusing to even know who's doing what. I think increasingly film and video is similar, especially with the proliferation of sort of viral videos and social video content. There's probably more than this, but there's at least 4 kinds of things that we think about. There's a producer, which is, not as hands-on, but much more conceptual. And I wouldn't really encourage anybody starting out to try to think of themselves as a producer necessarily. There's like motion graphics, which is the sort of where graphic design and video mix. And I for sure think that if I were starting out now, I would want to develop at least some competency in that. And Jeremy, you've done more of that than me. You could even mention some specific tools maybe that are good for starting out. Then there's like editing, which is just much more technical and maybe more like what you're alluding to, Jeremy. And I think, spend a weekend, buy a tutorial, or watch some videos on YouTube. I think learning how to edit video would be just a good skill to have at a low level. But then lastly, there's all the sort of strategy that goes around using video well. And so I think that's another place where anybody starting out should at least be able to quickly talk about how videos would fit into a campaign that they're working on, or have good ideas of innovative ways of using it. That doesn't mean you have to necessarily be the one to produce it or to write the script or do the editing. But having some competency in motion animation, low level editing, and how to think well about using video, I think would look really good in an interview, even if you're not going to have a producer credit anytime soon.
Cool.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And to speak to the resources side that Zach was hinting at, I think one of the things that I often took for granted as a student was just the access that you have to so many free resources. There's so many things that are just free to everyone online, which is beautiful, but there's also so many, tools that can get kind of expensive. So things like lynda.com, Skillshare have been ones that I've taken tutorials from even recently. And I know that a lot of them have really great education deals. Even a lot of the software does too, whether that's Adobe products or whether that's Sketch or Figma or any of those kind of subscription-based things. I was really keen in college to try to take opportunity of as many of those discounts as I could. I even remember senior year trying to, kind of rack up on a lot of those software programs, even things that I wasn't looking into professionally per se, things like video editing or sound editing, things like that, just so I could start to kind of round out some skills in those areas. But I would say, there's so many, one of the other things too, is there's so many YouTube tutorials. There's just as many bad ones as there are good ones. So that's a fair warning, but you can find just about any kind of very niche thing you may be looking to learn, through YouTube, through a Google search. There's so many resources out there. And I think that what I've often done is tried to take a course like Zach was saying, whether that's just a Skillshare course, and then try to build upon that by learning the lingo enough to know what to search for. That's probably a big problem for students, I would say, is that sometimes you don't even know an expertise well enough to know what to Google, which happens to me almost daily. I think it's helpful to have an understanding of vocabulary that you can start to learn from.
Those are great points. And actually, you know, when you mentioned lynda.com, because that LinkedIn has LinkedIn Learning now, which I swear I thought lynda.com became LinkedIn Learning, but I could be wrong about that. But that's where, do you guys see this industry utilizing LinkedIn as a way to connect either about internships, jobs, or just to do some connecting to learn more about, you know, what's going on in the industry?
I can't speak for Jeremy. I think it definitely has some traction as a professional networking tool. We use it when we're looking for candidates for roles. I've certainly formed professional, partnerships or collaborations through it. I'm on the board of something called the Content Council, which is based out of New York. And in that sort of content marketing sphere, LinkedIn is a big deal. They use it for all kinds of things. I haven't personally, as a designer, used it for any kind of professional development or learning. And I've never honestly seen much traction with sort of publishing or platforming on LinkedIn. It's been much more useful, almost like a tool like Handshake or something, just in having a Rolodex of people and knowing where they work and seeing when they switch jobs, which is valuable. Has that been your experience, Jeremy, or do you know, you might know more about it than I do?
No, not much at all, to be honest with you. I have kind of out of necessity upkept a LinkedIn profile just for all the reasons Zach was saying, that knowing that it'll show up when someone Googles your name perhaps, or something like that, or someone's checking you out. But I have by no means utilized all the things that I think LinkedIn does. I have not necessarily, to Zach's point, and I would completely agree, seen it have a ton of traction within the design community. One of the reasons for that is so many designers and developers may not have come through a traditional, college system. So a lot of times they're getting their footing on a platform like Dribbble for graphic designers, or Behance, which would be Adobe's, kind of portfolio platform, or even, for developers, for folks that may be interested in that, platforms like GitHub, for instance, where people are able to Stack Overflow, interact with questions and answers, and learn. There seems to be a ton of opportunities through platforms like that. Now, of course, like with any online platform, there can be a lot of noise kind of baked into the systems, but I have seen where folks have had some traction just connecting with people. That's another thing that I think these platforms are often really great for, that we don't give them credit for, is just having access to message someone is a really powerful tool. You really do have, you're pretty much one click away from a lot of the folks you may admire or want to reach out to, which is, I think, a great thing.
So that networking word is important, even though people always cringe when they hear networking. It's like using other people, and it's not really using, it's collaboration potential. I mean, I try to get new students kind of realizing that they will eventually be professionals in the field collaborating with others, because Jeremy and Zach, both of you all were like, this is about collaboration.
For sure.
So that I kind of use LinkedIn as, I tell students to use it kind of like, well, not only are there jobs, but people also can be a recommender or reference for you on LinkedIn. So it makes a public, especially if you've done something for a nonprofit, that they can then go, oh, look, they did an amazing job for us, so public representation. So yeah, I do, but I do see some industries don't fully utilize LinkedIn like some other, like for IT and cybersecurity and for quite a few fields, like if you're, especially business management, entrepreneurship, if you're not on LinkedIn, you are not.
No, I think you're right. You should take the time to be on there from a reputational standpoint. But Gigi, you touched on something that maybe is just as important or more important, which is, I think, the extent to which design as a career is still very much a trust industry, and very much driven by referrals. Everybody has seasons where they're busy or where they're not exactly the right fit for something. But if you have made yourself known to them as somebody who can do that work, designers hate to say, no, sorry, I don't even know anybody that can help you do that. We love to turn you on to somebody else. And so I think, to your point, the more you can be known as a person who can do A, B, and C competently and live up to that reputation. I mean, something 90% of Journey Group's work is word of mouth, just people that we know telling other people that they should call us. And so I don't think I could overstate how important that trust aspect is, and sort of becoming known as a trustworthy, reliable website builder or brand collateral designer or whatever it is. If you do that in one place for a couple of years, you'll start to get work just coming in.
Cool.
Yeah, I completely agree that I think meeting, I'm very much an old school analog person. I love meeting people face to face. Of course, the pandemic has made that challenging, but I will say that I think being just available as you can. I know that there's a lot of competing interests when you're a student, whether it's things that are weighing you down or whether it's just things that you're also interested in that are competing for attention. But I think just having the availability of being able to meet with someone, what's been incredible to me over the pandemic is how many folks that I've met via Zoom now, rather than, because everyone's cooped up in home. And of course, Zoom fatigue is a thing. So give yourself boundaries, find your inner peace. But I would say it's been so cool to have conversations that maybe formerly would have just been messaging back and forth, say, hey, do you have 15 minutes to hop on Zoom? I'd love to meet you. And I've been able to connect with folks in town. I've been able to connect with folks all over the place just for that very reason of people being willing to chat with one another. So I would say take advantage of that. Especially, I can only speak to our community in Charlottesville, but I am always increasingly impressed with how accessible people are here. That when people ask, or when you ask, do you have a moment to hop on the phone, hop on Zoom, hop on Google Hangouts, what have you, even in person, when hopefully the pandemic calms down and we can get coffee and things like that again. I've been impressed at how many people are so able to do that. It's especially faculty members, not to put them in the spotlight, they're busy people too, but because so many collegiate schedules are so flexible, a lot of times they do have little gaps of time, and even in the middle of the day that they could hop away to hang out and talk about something, or to answer questions. So I would absolutely use this time to try to do as much of that as you can.
Yeah, I really enjoyed getting to meet. I think both of you guys were there for the Tuesday Design Crawl Week last. I think it was October. I think it was last October. Yeah. It was, and it's sad to see that, but that's where it's neat to see. There's a Creative Mornings group that does stuff here in Charlottesville. Are there other groups besides the Tuesday Design Creative Mornings group that you all know about?
One that I'd recommend if folks have any interest in sort of the digital side of design work is there's a collaboration tool called Slack, and some friends of ours have created a really active community called Seville Slack that's easy to get into. But there's a design channel, there's a jobs channel, all kinds of really, really cool things being shared quietly that I think could be a good place to start becoming known and making introductions into what Jeremy was talking about, which is just reaching out and saying, hey, can we grab lunch or half an hour on Zoom? Cool. Well,
I actually went over to Facebook Live, and it looks like I must have not hit the right button.
That's okay.
We'll have the Zoom recording that I'll then push out, so I will share.
You can edit out all that bad stuff I said.
You didn't say anything bad. Yeah, I gotta edit out the front and the end. But anyway, last little thing, because we're at the end of our time, and I know you guys are really busy. And of course, it was interesting, Zach, when you said that COVID has been an interesting impact. So what knowing what you know today, what would you tell a student when coming up in the area? And you've touched on so many things that I don't know if you have things to say, but any insights you would want to share, like you wish you had known and wish you had done differently, or not?
I have one thought, Jeremy, if I can go first, or I can shut up and you can go first. I think when you're starting out, it's difficult to discern between the three kinds of things we've talked about: the tools themselves, the skills that you use the tools to do, and then the way of sort of being a designer professionally. And I think I would have told a younger version of me, and Jeremy, you already said a version of this probably better than I will, but understand that the tools are going to change pretty rapidly. The styles and the fashion is going to change just as quickly. And so focus on the skills that you want to be known for, and focus on what it is to be the designer in the room. You know, there isn't, I mean, we live at in such a great time, I think, to be in design, because there's just been such an embrace of design by business and by industry. And, you know, there isn't a boardroom or a C-suite that doesn't have an innovation officer or a design, you know, chief design officer. And so I think just learning how to do that earlier on, learning how to ask good questions, learning how to serve, and sort of get to the root of, like, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? Getting good at that earlier on, and trusting, to your point, Jeremy, that I can always spend Saturday brushing up on how to use the latest tool for XYZ, because I am known for my skill in this discipline or this thing. I would worry less about, you know, when I was in school, it was all macromedia. It was fireworks and Dreamweaver. And, you know, no one uses that. So just to illustrate my point, you know, I was so concerned about being the best at fireworks, which is useless. But there are skills behind that, and there's a way of thinking and being in a room behind that I think are much more relevant and will serve you better for a longer time.
Great points. Jeremy?
Yeah, those are fantastic. Mine are very related to Zack's. I've got two quick thoughts. One is that you'll never stop learning. You know, you can think sometimes that, you know, you'll have everything you need when you get that diploma or you get that certificate, and that you'll never have to learn anything again. And I've learned so much, even just in the last 6 months, compared to what I've learned in the last 6 years even. It's just, you never stop learning. So that eagerness to learn, I think, is such an amazing trait. And then the second thing would be, you know, that there's kind of this trend within the design industry to maybe overemphasize aesthetics and technical expertise, which both of those things are really important. We are in design, and it is a visual discipline. But I think oftentimes what can get de-emphasized are what a lot of people call like soft skills, which would be learning how to run meetings well, learning how to listen well, learning how to speak and articulate your own design decisions well. And to me, those are invaluable, and especially in a job market where those things matter so incredibly much. And I think they're really important traits. Like Zack said, you can always brush up on technical skills, but being able to just truly listen and be present with folks and hear their needs is something that you can always be. And it's a lifelong journey as far as perfecting those skills. I don't know if anyone's done it yet, but yeah, those are things that I would give equal footing as you're pursuing things.
Yeah, we have employers all the time saying, we can teach the technical skills, but we can't teach somebody how to work well with others, and we can't teach them how to have initiative. We can't teach them, you know, and so we are really, that's the main thing that we're screening on, even though, yes, and it sounds like in your all's industry that a certain amount of technical skill, you need to walk in the door with that. Just,
of course.
It can be a contributor on a relatively short timeline, but to also be a team player and all the skills that go with that.
To your point, Gigi, if you're looking at two candidates and one is, you know, at a 10 on the technical, but at a 5 on speaking, collaborating, being a kind thinker, and the other person's the other, I'd always hire the person that can be a team person and present well and think well and write well, knowing that we can get them to 10 on whatever the tool is.
Such a great point.
You guys, this was absolutely phenomenal. Sorry about the Facebook Live part, but we'll have the link. And I know that we'll have a ton of students that will so learn from this, and so I'm sure you might be hearing from some of our more proactive ones.
That'd be great.
So we appreciate you all doing what you do in this community and supporting, you know, all the, you know, because I know you support education systems, the postal service, you have clients from a broad range, and I know quite a few in the community. So thank you for that and for educating our audience through a link.
It's a great privilege for us, and I hope it's useful. I would just say, if you do end up getting questions about any of this talk, we could hop back on and do an addendum, or I'd be even willing to write up answers if that's useful. So please do pass through any questions you get
Yeah, I'll send
Well, I
this
can
to
help.
you guys as well as the instructor saying, hey, sorry about the technical glitch. But that's such a wonderful offer. Thank you, Zach. So, and Jeremy, I look forward to next time I see you.
Absolutely. This has been such an honor. I
And-
echo Zach's offer as well. I would be more than
Cool.
happy to answer
Well,
questions. I love that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's the young professionals that really appreciate the seasoned ones supporting.
You're very kind
More,
to us.
more and more seasoned with each passing day.
That's right.
There's nothing like the passage of time. But I hope you guys stay well. And thank you again for